War leaves more than broken buildings. It leaves broken infrastructure, poisoned water, and desperate civilians forced to survive on ingenuity rather than convenience. During World War II, soldiers and urban survivors faced this reality daily. In cities reduced to rubble, clean water could mean the difference between life and death. One of the most resourceful methods that emerged was the crumbled-brick water filter, a technique both simple and, honestly, surprisingly effective. Today, we're going to uncover how this device worked, rebuild it ourselves, and see if it truly could purify water in a survival situation. The idea behind the crumbled brick filter is straightforward, yet deeply clever. In a city where pipes are shattered, wells are contaminated, and bottles are scarce, survivors relied on what was immediately available: debris. Bricks, often broken into fragments during bombings, became more than construction waste. When crushed and layered with sediment, they could filter out harmful particles from water, making it drinkable, or at least safer to consume. Soldiers and civilians alike knew that even in the absence of sophisticated treatment methods, filtration could significantly reduce illness from waterborne pathogens. Understanding why broken bricks could purify water. At first glance, bricks might seem like a poor substitute for modern water filters. Yet the physics behind the crumbled brick method makes perfect sense. Bricks are porous by nature. Their internal structure contains tiny holes and channels that trap larger particles when water passes through. Layered carefully, these fragments act as a sieve, catching sand, dust and debris while allowing water to slowly trickle down. Historical accounts describe survivors layering bricks with sand gravel and even cloth from old uniforms or curtains. Each material added a different filtration stage. Bricks captured coarse particles. Sand removed finer sediments. Cloth and finer gravel layers ensured that suspended solids were filtered out before the water reached a container below. This method wasn't perfect. Chemical contaminants like heavy metals or bacterial pathogens weren't fully removed, but it significantly reduced the risk of disease compared to drinking straight from puddles or ruined wells. So, let's talk about how to reconstruct a World War II-style crumbled brick water filter. Rebuilding this filter is, honestly, surprisingly simple, though you'll need to pay close attention to detail if you want to replicate both the historical accuracy and the effectiveness. First, you start with the core material bricks. You're looking for fragments that are roughly 1 to 2 inches across. If the pieces are too large, water will flow too quickly and carry unwanted particles with it. On the other hand, if the pieces are too small, the filter will clog up almost immediately. You'll want to crush your bricks using a hammer, or, well, a mallet, and then sift out any dust that's too fine, since that can compact and block the water flow. Next up, you'll need to prepare your container. Back during the war, survivors often used whatever they could find. Discarded cans, buckets, sometimes even emptied fuel drums. The important thing is that the container allows water to flow from the bottom, usually through a small hole, and ideally you'd have a makeshift spout or funnel to control the drip. Now you begin layering. First, lay down a coarse gravel layer at the bottom. This stops brick fragments from escaping. Then add your crushed bricks on top, followed by sand and smaller gravel if you have them. A thin cloth at the very top acts as the first barrier, keeping large debris from getting into the filter. Each layer should be compacted lightly, just enough so it holds together, but not so tight that water can't percolate downward. Once you've got it all assembled, the filter is ready for a test. Pour water slowly into the top and keep an eye on how it flows through. According to wartime accounts, filtered water would come out clearer and with fewer floating particles, though you'd still want to boil it for safety, to be honest. In a survival scenario, using fire to boil filtered water is the best way to eliminate any remaining pathogens, while the filter itself helps reduce sediment that could otherwise make boiling a real chore. So let's talk about how the crumbled brick filter still fits into our world today. You know, this technique isn't just some historical curiosity, it actually has some real, practical uses even now. Urban survivalists, preppers, and, well, history buffs can all use this method to figure out how to cope if, say, the infrastructure collapses or the water gets contaminated. For example, if a city faces prolonged flooding or a disaster knocks out water services for days, a crumbled brick filter can step in to provide emergency filtration using debris you'd typically find lying around in urban environments. Now you can experiment with a few variations to make the filter more effective. Layering in charcoal, something that was actually used during the war, helps take care of odours and even some chemical contaminants. Mixing up gravel of different sizes, well, that improves the flow rate while still keeping the filtration efficient. And even using clothing from discarded materials, that's a nod to what civilians and soldiers would have done when proper filters just weren't available. The real trick is resourcefulness. The filter was never about getting it perfect, but about surviving when the odds were stacked against you. It's important, though, to test and understand the limits of this method. You absolutely need to know what the filter can and cannot do. Crumbled bricks are good for physically removing particles, but you know they don't actually sterilize the water. Bacteria, viruses and chemical pollutants like nitrates, well, those are mostly left untouched. Folks back then, they often knew this and would pair filtration with boiling chemical treatments or even sunlight exposure whenever they could. Testing in a controlled environment is, well, actually quite simple for enthusiasts. You just collect muddy or debris-laden water and run it through the filter, watching for changes in clarity. Then measure the flow rate and look out for any clogging points. This hands-on approach, you know, really builds appreciation for the skill and ingenuity that civilians under fire had to muster. The beauty of this technique is that it demonstrates a foundational principle of survival. Even simple materials, thoughtfully arranged, can solve critical problems when resources are scarce. So, why did this technique matter so much to World War II urban survivors? Well, during the war, urban survival wasn't just about finding food. It was about managing risk in every small action, especially when it came to water. Contaminated water, believe it or not, spread disease faster than bombs in some areas. Crumbled brick filters were cheap, accessible, and quite often the only option when municipal water systems failed. They really reflect a mindset of improvisation and adaptation under extreme pressure, offering insight into both civilian resilience and military ingenuity. The technique also illustrates how historical knowledge can remain relevant. These days, modern disaster preparedness often overlooks low-tech solutions in favour of, packaged filters or chemical treatments. Revisiting the crumbled brick filter reminds us that ingenuity doesn't always require money or technology. just observation, experimentation, and a good understanding of the materials at hand. Bringing the lesson into everyday urban survival practice. Even for folks not facing wartime destruction, this method actually offers practical training. Learning to identify materials for filtration, understanding how porosity and layering affect flow, and testing improvised devices, all of that builds survival skills you can use in floods, storms, or long-term grid failures. It also, I think, deepens historical empathy. Understanding the everyday decisions civilians had to make under fire really enriches our perspective of World War II beyond just the battles and politics. You can take it further by combining historical research with hands-on experimentation. Try recreating variations documented in wartime diaries, or, test different debris combinations in controlled conditions. Not only do you practice survival skills, but you gain a tactile connection to history, seeing how ordinary objects became lifelines in extraordinary circumstances. The crumbled brick filter is more than a wartime hack. It's a lesson in ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience. By understanding how civilians and soldiers used rubble to purify water, we gain insight into survival strategies that honestly transcend time. Whether you're a history enthusiast, a survivalist, or simply curious about forgotten urban techniques, exploring this method offers both practical skills and a richer understanding of life during wartime. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into a World War II survival technique, make sure to subscribe and share. Each story we uncover brings history back to life and keeps the lessons of resilience alive. Join the community of historians and survivalists who value knowledge, experimentation, and the incredible resourcefulness of those who lived through some of history's most challenging urban landscapes.